Yeah. So hello and thanks Anand for giving me this opportunity. I love talking to people, so that's what I'll do. And what I'm going to basically talk about is science in the city. I teach at Maulana Azad University in the physics department. Yeah, please. Yeah. So here this is one example of why such work is so essential. If you have a look at this in January 2018, that's last year, not a long time back, there was a lunar eclipse in the month of January. And this was called the blood moon, basically because the moon during the eclipse at that time looked red. It was basically scattered light which caused it to look red. And we actually had an episode, if you think that science awareness is not important for us, if you actually look at this episode, what happened was that in Uppal, there was a cab driver who actually beheaded a 6-month baby. Okay, it was actually human sacrifice done. And the head was hung in a particular direction because he was told by some godman that if he does that, it will solve the problems in his life. So problems in his life were his wife was unwell and economic problems, etc. And so this guy actually went to Sikandrabad station and stole a baby from people at the pavement, went back home, cut the head, he cut the head, washed the whole thing off and hung it and kept it. And this happened last year in Uppal. Okay, so if we think that practices are like this are things which happened a long time back or very far away from cities, then you're actually living in a very wrong world where you think that such things don't happen. And this was a real shock, which is directly an indicator why it is so important that there is a certain amount of science awareness amongst people in the city, right? Yeah, next please. So astronomy, I'm a professional astronomer. So earlier, a long time back when I was younger, I always did astronomy workshops basically to convert people to astronomy, make them all astronomers. I thought the whole world should do astronomy because there's nothing better than that subject. But now I've actually changed my stand because you actually see that astronomy also can be very effectively used to instill scientific temper. So if you can actually just convince people through the tool of astronomy as to what is rational thinking, what is the scientific method, how do we actually make our conclusions about the universe, where did it come from, where did life come from, what is happening in the universe, what is the sun. For example, what is an eclipse? Eclipse is nothing but shadows. There's nothing exceptional happening in it at all. There's nothing. Right? Even this myth which is still held on with people about not eating during eclipses and all kinds of things which are forbidden during eclipses, it's absurd. You just have a shadow falling. There's nothing happening at all. There's no extra radiation falling on you, nothing happening at all. So that's when I changed my stance, where I thought that astronomy has to actually, it can be used as a tool for the way to STEM, to guide people towards STEM, but not everybody needs to do STEM. The others at least need to rationally think. With whatever they're doing in their life, that's fine, but they need to rationally think. And in today's time, when you see if you actually see the kind of mood in the country or the kind of attitudes which people have, you'll actually see that this is something we really lack. Rational thinking. People are a bit too happy to take up anything which involves irrational thinking. That is most, people love hearing about it and they are most, they gravitate toward things like that. But moment you tell them to think about something, it gets too much to be thinking. So let's see, what is the kind of process which you actually have? So one way is outreach. You basically talk to general public, or you go to schools, talk to students, or you do it at the university, right? And let's see, if you do it in terms of education, it would be the childhood education, the school education, university education. Next, please. So there's an interesting thing. You can see this. So in science, in fact, in most things, it's usually best to begin in the beginning. But in some of things, of course, like a dog like that, it's better to begin at the other end. For instance, if you want to paint a dog green, it might be best to begin with the tail, as it doesn't bite. So in this kind of approach, the earlier thing is to start from the other end. And that's what we'll do. Yeah, next please. It's the childhood thing. What happens in childhood? Everybody goes through, most people go through a school education, right? And what happens in schools? You basically have a lack of inspiring teachers because of the payment, because the lack of either they don't employ enough of teachers or they don't pay them well enough, or they are not sufficient teachers. Often the same teacher is like teaching like a machine all day long, for various classes, various things. Number of students are large, and the basic aim of the teacher is to just complete the syllabus, right? It's all exam oriented. The parents, what about the parents? Parents are, there's peer pressure, exams, grades, and the parents, all that they do is they want to compare their kids to other people's kids and do whatever they can do to prove that their kids are far better, right? So basically you see that there's a total distrust between the two, between parents and children, and between children and teachers. So what parents expect from children is not what the children expect from the parents. Similarly, what the child expects from the teacher is not what the teacher gives the child. So what you see is that there's a total mismatch of expectations from both sides, due to which all these people are unhappy in their own way, because neither of them are getting what they would actually like. If you actually see, that's an old way. And yeah, another important thing is that this is not to do with today's times, nor is it to do with our country or our city. It's a universal thing. So what I've got down is a quote by Mark Twain, which says, "I've never let my schooling interfere with my education." This is Mark Twain's times. Yeah, next please. And then you have quotes by even Einstein, where education is what remains after one has forgotten what one has learned in school, right? So he actually saw the education process of what you do after school. And it's a miracle that curiosity survives formal education. I'll talk about this later. If this was a bunch of children, younger children, you would already have questions. But as we age, we are kind of taught to keep quiet and not ask questions. So this acceptance thing is this thing. So just to convince you, yeah. Another important fact is the way we actually grade people. We have this one-size-fits-all kind of thing, right? So you have a bunch of these things over here, and let's have a fair selection. We call this a fair selection, right? So in a fair selection, everybody climbed the same tree, irrespective about what kind of animal you are. Yeah, yeah, next please. So we have been doing various exercises like with school children's, and you have Olympiads which are run for school children's. You have them in astronomy and physics and maths and biology, etc. The idea of Olympiads is that they are not part of the regular competitive exams, and generally questions are framed differently for them, and therefore we've been training Olympiad students since a long time, the Indian team, and India does very well, especially in the astronomy Olympiads. We always top the list of medals, and a good number of the Olympiad students do get into professional astronomy also. But this is only a very upper, rim of these children. KVPY is Kishore Vigyan Protsahan Yojana. This is a yojana by DST, where DST actually by 10th standard, if students actually show excellence in science, there are exams done for KVPY. And if the child shows excellence in science, then the government supports the child in terms of a scholarship. So it covers for their undergraduate, postgraduate, and to your PhD level. So your scholarship accordingly increases as you go up the ladder. Earlier this was allowed even if you did engineering, but now it's only done for the basic sciences. So if after 12th standard the child then goes in for engineering, then he's out of KVPY. So KVPY you have to be with basic sciences. But as long as you continue with KVPY, basic sciences, you will be supported by the government till your PhD. So it will start from 10th standard till PhD. Yeah, next please. Now what happens with astronomy education? Astronomy education, the problem is in some places it's there in courses at UG, PG. But in school it's almost not there. We are taught seasons when we do geography. I don't even understand very well why when we do geography, we do, the year and seasons and stuff like that. And then some part of astronomy is taught, it's almost not taught, or it's the last subject in your, the last chapter in your book, which generally the teacher is too tired and she says just do it on your own. So essentially it's not there. And this is a very surprising and a very uncomfortable thing, because most people are attracted to astronomy. Whatever said and done, it's the best, right? So I don't understand. I don't understand why is it not part of the curriculum. In most places, it is not part of the curriculum, and this is again a global phenomenon. Globally, it's not put as part of the curriculum. Somehow, it's considered you just need to have physics, chemistry, biology, and yeah. Astrology would be given more support. Yeah, that's right. So there are issues with that. We'll go on with this thing. Yeah. Again, astronomy, since it's a very specialized subject, there is a problem about jobs. You can teach physics like I teach physics, but essentially there are only a few places where you can get jobs. And there's often what is called the leaking pipe problem, which again somebody mentioned gender issues, but I'll touch upon it slightly. We anyway have what is called the leaking pipe problem. Anyway, you have lesser girls in physics and maths, and still at school level you may have 50-50. At PhD level also you may have 50-50, but as you go beyond that, faculty positions, you may have 20% of women, and then when you go to director levels or higher levels, then you'll almost have none, right? So that's called the leaking pipe problem. So somehow as women go up the ladder, the flow goes down. Yeah. So what are the kind of experiments? I basically first talk about some of the experiments we've been trying to do. So one of us, a good experiment which we actually did, which worked very successfully, is to actually screen movies, science fiction movies, and actually show people what is the good advanced science in the movie. This is a clip of the very good movie which was called Contact, one of the very good science fiction movies. And actually this is an old program which we've done, where we actually screened the movie and actually asked people to assess what is right and what is wrong in the movie. Because most science fiction movies do not have science in them, right? Yeah, next please. Yeah, it's fiction. So we've done, I have a husband sitting over here, Subha Reddy has been with us also. We've done a lot of programs in Lamakan because it's easy to get children around. And we've had various, there's a telescope making thing where you actually explain to them the principle in making a telescope, make telescopes, and have various kind of workshops. Yeah. Another important thing I realized about outreach is that we also need to provide access to non-English speaking students, right? Because otherwise we live in this stupid bubble of us, which is only made of English speaking people, and we think that's the norma, which is not. And therefore it's very essential to do outreach or awareness in local languages. Unfortunately, I'm not Telugu, so I can't speak Telugu, but I've learned Urdu. I can even read and write that. And so actually on the left, you actually see we had done a program in a place called Jedi Metla, which is outside near Warangal. But we were at Osmania University earlier. And so we actually had a student of ours who was teaching at the place. So while we were doing it, he translated. So we actually had a program kind of in Telugu, but he was translating. And now because I even know Urdu, so we're actually working with Kriti Foundation, that's an NGO, and they basically work with slum children in the Shekhpet area. So then you can manage it in Urdu. So we've been doing it even in Urdu. This is Safdariya School, which is another Urdu medium school. Next please. I also have a web page of mine called Shrishti Astronomy, which has things. Next please. Olympiads, we do training for the Olympiad students, coach them for it. And we had a nurture camp, that is for the students who do the Olympiads. To clear them, they did 2 weeks of research. Next, please. We've had winter schools, various winter schools for undergraduate students. So the first one was at Taj. The second one, which we had 2 years back over here, we had students from 13 different countries who actually came for the school, which was a very successful one. This is another kind of outreach education activity where there's a radio telescope, which is this thing by this Professor Deshpande you see over there. And this is in a place called Gauri Bignur, which is near Bangalore, where they actually have this array of radio telescopes. There's another big telescope over there. And those are my students over there at Maulana Azad. And they could actually, even now they did a project where you can log into the telescope and get observations and observe with it. So this is over there. Yeah, so the Astronomical Society of India has a public outreach and education committee, of which I am the chairman. And so what we do is we do various exposure camps. We even did a camp, many camps rather, we've done it at Jantar Mantar to show people how Jantar Mantar instruments can actually effectively can be used. And even in today's time, you can get a 1-minute accuracy if you do timing with Jantar Mantar. With these things. So we had the Festival of Exhibition of Measurement, Astrophotography, the Zero Shadow Day, various things which we had. Next, please. There's even a group in India which does what is called citizen science, where you actually encourage citizens to access data. So one of the best telescopes we have in India is called the GMRT, the Giant Meter Radio Telescope, which is near Pune. What you can see over here is an array of radio telescopes, 30 antenna which each have a dish of 45 meters, which you see on the left over there. And basically this encourages B.Tech kind of students who have some background, B.Tech kind of background at least, where they can actually observe, and there are sessions conducted where they are taught how to analyze the data. Yeah. I did another workshop about last year. here was basically to do astro-themed experiments. That is, if we can have experiments in school as well as in university, which are basically astro-themed, because one thing we lack in our education system is hands-on experiments. So it was basically to explore astro-themed experiments. And next please. The virtual observatory also is that in astronomy we have a lot of data which is publicly available. Okay? So what we actually have is there's something called the virtual observatory, where sitting from wherever you are, you can actually access data from the Hubble Space Telescope, from Chandra, from almost all telescopes in the world. They all, after a certain period, they put up all their observations on the archives, and you can actually access them and be taught how to use them. So this we actually do it for UG, PG kind of students. We've recently done one in July at BITS. So for students where they can actually access the data and do some projects with the data from some of the best telescopes in the world. Next, please. I had also attended this meeting in Vienna, which is of the United Nations. So like I mentioned, this is not a phenomena which is only happening in our country or whatever. So United Nations actually started an office for outer space affairs, which basically again explores what is called the open universe as to how can the data we have from various satellites or telescopes, how can they be used by even school teachers, right? Educators right from school level to university level to actually add on to their data. Or like, if you all would be aware of this young boy who actually tried to use Chandrayaan-2 data to actually look for the Vikram lander, right? That's a perfect example of a person who has access to data and actually uses his own understanding to, access. I hope you're not aware of this, right? The Vikram lander, right? So there was this boy from Chennai who actually accessed NASA data to actually find the location of Vikram lander. Yeah. That is another story, because ISRO is like, they think that they said, oh, we already knew. So he did do nothing else. But they knew, but they didn't tell us. Okay, they don't want to tell us things. So if you don't want to tell me, I better find out on my own, right?
And the boy found out.
Exactly. But for them it was like an ego issue. So they said, no, he didn't find anything, he anyway knew it. So that's a different issue of how does... Exactly. Exactly, I agree with you. This is a perfect example of what I was talking about. If a common citizen has access to data, right? Which everybody has a right to that data, because the satellites, the telescopes, they are all made with public money, right? So people are paying for it. So people are paying for that, and if he has access, Sanjay is right, it's a perfect example of a person who just uses a little bit of his brain and actually does it, right?
I will bring him to
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So, but the problem is, that is the problem in our system, that number one, we don't want transparency. What is the big secret? Why does ISRO have to hide things, right? I mean, from so-called common people, why can't we be told everything? And sorry, I think I overshot. But, sorry, I shouldn't talk about this, but it's an issue. Next, please. I'm almost finishing. And recently I came back where, the International Astronomical Union also now has an office for astronomy education. And this is actually, it is astronomy for education. It's not astronomy education. So the idea being is, again, to use astronomy as a tool to educate people. It is not about astronomy education per se. It is, how can it be used as a tool? Because every other subject, like I said, everybody does not need to do astronomy, right? But how can it be actually used to educate others, right? So that's this thing. Yeah, and I think the last slide. So I'll just end with this. I'm sorry I overshot, but obviously you can read that and I will read it again. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Priya. That was wonderful. So I think Priya and Anant have set the stage for me to talk really well. I wasn't as prepared as Priya. I do not have a presentation. So I'm just going to start by introducing myself. I am Aditi Khandekar. I did my PhD in human genetics in the US and did a postdoc there, moved to Hyderabad a couple of years ago. So a little disclaimer here, I've done very little backyard biology workshops actually in Hyderabad, and so some of you might think I'm not qualified to talk about science in the city for Hyderabad itself, but I can talk about urban scientific temper to some extent. In Hyderabad and during my grad school as well as my postdoc, I've conducted a few backyard biology workshops for mostly children in their after school kind of program, after school care kind of a program. And these used to be either a one-day long workshop, a few hour long workshops, or workshops that went on for months. So for the ones that went on for months, we were actually able to do experiments that went on longer and do a more detailed kind of a biology concept understanding for them, and then trying to teach them how to think about experimental questions and how to think about answering those questions, how to collect data, statistics, and all of that. But we also tried to inculcate some of that in those hour-long workshops or day-long workshops as well. So what we mostly did was, in backyard biology, what we mostly do is we just basically take children outdoors and basically, like Anand said, we just have, first of all, we just have them observe non-human living creatures that are out there. So in one of the experiments, we had these children collect all different kind of leaves, and these leaves then had, well, they observed and they told us that these leaves had different colors, different kind of vein patterns in it, and then we took that a step further and asked them why could that be, and what does that mean, what does veins or leaves mean, and stuff like that. And we ended up doing a little bit of an experiment there where we used normal fountain pen ink and dipped those leaves in it, and then just saw how the ink traveled through it to see the pattern of those veins. So those are the kind of workshops. What I, as a geneticist, have loved doing with children, especially in middle school, is talking to them about genetics, heredity, doing little DNA extraction workshops with them. And those are absolutely possible in the kitchen or a home setting without any kind of laboratory chemicals, access to any kind of laboratory chemicals. So I've done those, and I've taken that also a step further and tried to talk about mutations and how DNA translates to proteins, and how proteins translate to characteristics, and so on and so forth. So those are the kind of backyard biology workshops I've been part of. I've done some of that in one of the after-school programs that a non-profit runs here in Hyderabad in the Gachibowli region, in one of the Zilla Parishad after schools. And I would like to mention here that these children are really inquisitive, and there is something about age so in my experience, children are generally very open to asking questions, and they are quite curious by nature, and then eventually maybe that goes away at some point. Actually, I would like to talk about one of the recent incidents that I experienced along these lines. One of my friend's daughters, I was sitting with her and I was showing her, one of my cousins is an excellent wildlife photographer, so I was showing her pictures of his recent trip, and there was a picture of a tiger with its mouth open. I think it was a male tiger, with its mouth open, and for the first time in my life, I noticed that there were these incisors. So tigers have extra incisors that sit in front of their mouth, in front of all the rest of their teeth. And she noticed that too, which was great. I did not mention anything to her, and she noticed that too, and she asked me about it herself. And so she asked me, why do tigers have those extra teeth that we do not have or others do not have? And I, instead of answering her question, I asked her what she thinks they are meant to do, and she guessed it rightly, and she said that probably because they are hunters and they need to catch prey. And so that was a perfectly correct answer, and this is first standard student that I'm talking about. So I was very impressed, and I decided to take it a step further, and I asked her, so I have a house cat, and she comes to our house, plays with the cat very often, so she's met Minnie. And so one of the questions I asked her was, does Minnie have those teeth as well? Because cats are also hunters, also same family generally, and she guessed, I think, half guessed that Minnie does not have those set of teeth, which is correct. Minnie, so house cats do not have those extra set of teeth. So then I decided to grill her a little more, and I asked her, then why does she think, how come do big tigers have those extra teeth and Minnie does not? What is the purpose that they might, or why is that so? And she couldn't answer it, and that's a tough question, so I totally get it. But I told her that she could take help from any other adult in the house. So I was in her house, so her family. So I told her that she could get help from any other adult in the house. And she came back after a few minutes and told me that, well, so tiger has those extra set of teeth. Tigers have those extra set of teeth that cats do not, because God made it so. And that was, yeah. So that was really, really frustrating. And what happened, I realized later, is that she went and asked her grandmother about the reason, and her grandmother did not know the answer, did not want to say that I do not know the answer, and just decided to tell her that because God made it so. But I think that's how we kill curiosity in kids. So I was there in that situation to tell her, well, but even if the God made it so, he or she made it for a particular reason. And that reason is scientific. So I was able to tell her that, but what happens with a lot of children is they get these kind of answers, like, because God made it so, because I am telling you so, because our ancestors have always done it like this. Because they get those kind of answers, I think eventually the brain preconditions into just accepting that and stop asking further questions. And that I think is a difference between curiosity in a child, or that is why there is a natural curiosity in a child which goes away with age, unfortunately. That is one of my experiences here, and I think I'm going to stop talking here and instead pose a question for Priya and other science educators and science communicators who are in the group, or just open it for general discussion as to, this has been a challenge for me, and that's why I do not have an answer to this question, and that's why I'm opening it to everyone else. Why do you think, or how do you think do we approach developing some kind of a scientific temper in adults? So we target children, and outreach is easier, much easier in children. But how do we try and get to an adult population?
I agree with Aditi that educating adults is tougher. Probably, like she mentioned, we are conditioned through life that God made it like that, or we are, probably it's a controversial thing for me to say, but the way we are told that you don't question elders, right? If an adult tells you sit like this, you better sit like this. If you are told wear red, you wear red. If you have to wear black, you wear black. You don't argue about it. And so because of that conditioning, it's on. So because of that conditioning, I think adults, by the time they reach adulthood, the whole idea of rational thinking or questioning, that's totally killed. So it's very, very difficult. I myself agree that even at home, with family members, with the older family members, if you try to convince them about anything, you tell them, again, the eclipse case or anything like that, and you tell them that's not true, they'll say, okay, you say whatever you want to say, but no, beta, I'll do this, you do whatever you want to do. So I agree that's a very difficult thing, and the problem is in our traditions. Traditionally, it is considered bad to be arguing. Somehow arguing with your teacher or your adult is seen in bad light. It is considered as disrespectful, right? And hence, I agree that it is very tough. It is difficult. With adults, it's really, really difficult. But it requires to be done. So actually, even at this Astronomy for Education meeting, we were all talking about school children. I was saying, but the bigger problem is the adults. Because the adults are making the laws, they are making policy decisions for us, and they are not. Yeah, so the results of doing it for school children today will be seen after 15 years. The Jan Vigyan Vedika, JVV. And they are they're in a very, a lovely organization, because a lot of these things are done in the terms of witchcraft and all that. So they actually go and rescue people, because often it happens not too far from the city also, barely 30 kilometers out of the city. You have Dalit farmers, etc., who are really tortured and killed on the pretext of witchcraft, but actually it is some issue about land or something like that. And they, so the JVV people still do a very good job of actually rescuing such people.
Okay, so I'll talk about the nutrition question first. I haven't come across any literature that talks about nutrition and its correlation with. Temporarily it might affect brain function, but I haven't come across a literature that talks about a long-term effect. But that is just something I could be missing. But I do not necessarily think there should be a correlation.
That there does exist a problem, not only in science communication, but also in science teaching. For example, when I studied in Moscow State, we actually did philosophy of science for a whole year. We were taught philosophy of science, but almost no department in India, Indian universities, teaches philosophy of science. So it starts from the teacher, that the teacher itself is not trained, and then even in terms of communication, if you read any post in the media, right, about, for example, even Chandrayaan 2, everybody wants to read about it, but when you read it, it's all information, it's going to be launched at this time, that time, this, whatever. But nobody gives you any information, is that why is it being launched in a particular way, what's happening, what are the issues. Nobody wants to highlight that. A little bit, not much, a little bit. Not, yeah, a little bit, but not sufficiently enough. Yeah, so the problem is, I think, a lot to do with our attitudes. Because when your child tells you he wants to do physics, maths, chemistry, you say, very good, beta, go to IIT, right? So then the kid's focus is also, forget about the concepts, I got to crack all the questions and answer it. And that's what your parent also tells you, okay, please do that, beta, please solve as many problems as you can, you solve it, right? So I think a problem is with the approach, the way students approach it, the way educators approach it, and then the way the common man approaches it, and then the way even the media gives it back to you. So I wish we had a direct solution to the problem. The problem does exist. Things need to be done about it for sure. But the solution is not so direct and not so straightforward. And hopefully as we explore, people will find better ways of doing it. That's all the hope. Let's be optimistic about it, that we can hopefully do it at some time.
Yes, so I agree with, I keep saying that, but I agree with all of what you said. So there is a small crop of science communicators, science educators out there, and I would like to believe that I'm part of it, who are aware of the problem that we come across as sitting on top of everyone else, and we are not always able to communicate properly and communicate with every kind of a mind, every kind of a person, and some of us do come across, what I'm trying to say is we are aware that this problem exists, and I was also taught a semester-long philosophy course in my PhD. That was in the US. So I am aware of different kind of methodologies and trying different kind of ways of talking to adults. Sometimes it does work. I'm not saying that it never works and it's impossible to communicate science to adults or instill this kind of a scientific thinking into adults who are not usually used to doing so. I'm not saying it's absolutely impossible. It's quite possible, and I think it will come with experience and a little bit more of reading, or experience, you're doing more than anything
More than all
else
that, I
on
think
my
the
part.
scientific community is responsible to do that.
Right.
That's what we need to do.
So, and there was a question about do scientists think about social sciences as well? And again, I would like to believe that there is a new crop of scientists and some of the really good, like veteran scientists in India have a very excellent understanding of, and all over the world, have an excellent understanding of importance of social sciences. Yeah, I mean, I'm married to a social scientist, so I better take that into account. I better think about social sciences when I'm talking about science. Yeah, so I think things are changing. I think it's not all hopeless, and I think we are getting to a better kind of a flexibility in when we communicate science, when we talk about educating and instilling some kind of a scientific temper, some kind of a rational thinking. Things are changing.